بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين، وفقنا توفيق الصالحين. اللهم علمنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا من سيئاتنا أعمالنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا سيئات أعمالنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا أصلح لنا شأنه كله، لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. Okay, so alhamdulillah, we're on lesson 14. Some of the earlier lessons I deleted some of the prostration or forgetfulness sessions. I think one prostration of forgetfulness session and at least one other session. If I find a mistake, or if there's a stronger opinion or something like that, because I don't want the recording to stay and people to listen to an opinion that isn't the stronger opinion without me mentioning it, or if there's a mistake, I'm going to delete the recording and do another one. So that's why sometimes you'll find that the recordings are deleted. Okay, bismillah. So alhamdulillah, we're on lesson 14, and we are, so a few things. Alhamdulillah, we're pretty much done with the prostration of forgetfulness. Actually, we are done with it. And what I wanted to do is just review the makruhāt and actions that don't, and to actually do the actions that don't necessitate prostration of forgetfulness. And then the actions that invalidate the prayer. So that's really important, obviously, because there's some actions you can't rectify with the prostration of forgetfulness. And then there's some differences between the nafil and the fard prayer in terms of how you would address the mistakes because of the difference in the rulings within the nafil. When you compare the nafil and the fard. So, okay, bismillah. Just trying to make sure. Okay, alhamdulillah, we're online. Okay, so first thing, because we're actually on in the month of Safar, and it's the last week of Safar, alhamdulillah, we're going to be starting the month of Rabi'ul Awwal. Really, really looking forward to, alhamdulillah. I can't tell you how many blessings. One, I've heard from other people that they've had in this month in terms of dreams, and also for me, subhanAllah, how, things just really open up, subhanAllah, in this month. And so one thing I wanted to mention, that in the month of Safar, sometimes people will send out that, they'll send out emails about, tribulations coming down in the in certain days of the month in Safar. So I just wanted to mention something something that some of the shuyukh had mentioned, and also I'm actually quoting from Lata'if al-Ma'arif, which is Imam Ahmad. So his full name is Abu al-Faraj, that's his kunya, Abdurrahman ibn Ahmad ibn Rajab ibn Rajab al-Hanbali al-Damashqi. So he's known as Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. His book Lataif al-Ma'arif, which has it's separated into months. So each month, each lunar month, he talks about the benefits and some of them related to hadith and so on. So he has a month I'm on the month of Safar. وظيفة شهر Safar. And he starts out with a quote, with the hadith, and it's in the Sahihain, so it's in Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, and it's from Sayyidina Abi Huraira, أنه قال لا عدوى ولا هامة ولا صفر. لا عدوى ولا هامة ولا صفر. So adwa is infection or contagion, and hama, I'll go over that, and safar with the sad, and we'll go over that. So adwa is contagion. So la adwa, la an-nafi lil-jins. So there's no adwa, no contagion, but there is contagion, right? So he Ibn Rajab, he explains it. He says that they that the majority of ulama that said it's not, there's no, it's ولا نسخ في ذلك, it's not abrogated, ولكن اختلفوا في معنى قوله لا عدوى, meaning what does it mean لا عدوى, no contagion, no infection. And that it is that in the past, لما كان يعتقد أهل الجاهلية من أنه من أن هذه الأمراض they infect بطبعها من غير اعتقاد تقدير الله لذلك, يدل على هذا قوله. Okay, so he says that basically this is the Prophet ﷺ is basically negating, and the by the way, the hadith that I quoted, it's only part of a hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ saying la adwa wa la hamata wa la safar, and the Arabi asks him, what about the camel that, basically there's a healthy camel, and then it has it's in proximity with a camel that has scabies. Scabies, mangy, it has some kind of skin disease, and then the healthy one becomes affected. And the Prophet ﷺ said, then who infected the first one? Right, so that's the entire hadith basically. And so the scholar said that it's not that adwa doesn't exist, but in the past people would believe that these things, they have these illnesses, they بطبعها, that they cause the infection in and of themselves. That it's not that Allah infects, that was their belief, but that these بطبعها, that it's in their natural disposition to infect, and not that they're just means. So the Muslim believes that they're just means, and that Allah is the one who's the doer. Right, so that's one. La adwa wa la hamata wa la safar. So the Prophet ﷺ was basically, in a nutshell, explaining to the Sahabi, the Arabi, the Bedouin man, also Sahabi, that who got the first one infected. So the one who got the first one infected was the one who got all the others infected. So these are just means, and we don't believe that they in themselves have any effect. La bittab'a. Right? So because if the fire burned, or if the thing if the thing did the contagion, or for example, if the knife cut, it would always cut. If it was the knife that was doing the cutting. So we don't believe that these things they actually have any ability, but it's Allah that creates the infection, and these are just means. Because Sayyidina Ibrahim wasn't cut by the knife, and if Sayyidina Ibrahim, when he passed the knife over his son, it didn't cut. So if the knife was what did the cutting, then it would always cut. if it had the innate ability to cut. Right, ولا عدوى. So that's the first part. لا عدوى ولا هامة ولا صفر. So hama was this also a type of a superstition. They would believe that in Jahiliyyah, so pre-Islam, that a person who's died after they passed away, its spirit, certain bones would they would إذا مات صارت روحه عظامه هامة وهو طائر يطير وهو شبيه بيتغير. So they would go into a bird and it would fly. So it's a type of they would believe in a type of a reincarnation. So the Prophet is negating. So this meaning that this is not our belief, right? So that's what la hamata. Now the third part of the hadith, of the longer hadith, of this long hadith, is wala safara. Okay, so and that's why I'm mentioning the hadith, is I want to discuss that specifically. So the scholars differed. They differed on what did the Prophet ﷺ mean by it. So some of them said that لا صفر. فقال كثير من المتقدمين صفر داء في البطن. So the early scholars, many of them said that safar was actually a stomach illness. And some of them said that no, the Prophet meant actually the month of Safar. And then out of the group that meant that it was the month of Safar, they differed. They differed on what did the Prophet mean when he said there's no Safar, i.e. meaning the month. So one of the meanings they took is that because in the past, in pre-Islam, what they would do is they would so Muharram was a sacred month. So and they weren't allowed to fight. And what they would do is they would make Muharram a non-sacred month. So fighting would be permitted. And then they would make Safar a sacred month. Right? And then the other opinion is that and the Prophet saying not to do that. And the other opinion was that they would say that Safar has a bad omen, so it's a bad omen month. So bad things will happen to you in this month. It's the sha'un, right? And so the Prophet was, negating that it's the month is not a bad omen month. And subhanAllah, here in Lataif al-Ma'arif, he actually mentions a hadith. It's not an authentic hadith. It's from Sayyidina Jabir. And he says that the Prophet ﷺ, and I've heard this from one of my teachers also, that the Prophet ﷺ made dua during the days of the Battle of the Trench. Dua ala al-ahzab. Yom al-Ithnain. So he made a dua on Monday. وَالثُّلَثَاء وَالْأَرْبِعَةِ. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And he was answered on Wednesday between Dhuhr and Asr. And so Sayyidina Jabir basically mentioned that he would, if he was worried or if there was something big that was concerning him, basically would make dua between Dhuhr and Asr on a Wednesday. And that he would get answered. SubhanAllah. So it is so we should take it as a blessed time, and not that it's a bad omen time that tribulations will be sent down. And so I just wanted to mention that. Alhamdulillah. Okay. And then going to the So just reviewing really quick, saying makruhāt, so saying the Basmalah in the obligatory prayer. So none of these actions would require make sunnah or require such the sahu. saying the ta'awudh in the obligatory prayer, any dua before, during, or after the Fatiha, dua while bowing, prostrating on one's garment, etc. So these are makruh acts, reciting the Quran while bowing, right? For the one who speaks Arabic, to recite du'as within the prayer in other than Arabic, what is also makruh. Closing the eyes, saying Alhamdulillah after one sneezes. So they're makruh, so they're not also going to break the prayer. Placing the feet together, raising one foot, unless it's due to lengthy standing, unless you want to raise your foot. Like lift it up, lift the heel up a little bit because you're feeling tired because of lengthy recitation. SubhanAllah, in the past they would recite long surahs, so Allah give us the sweetness of Quran so that we want to recite long surahs. Placing one foot on top of the other. So it's makruh, it's not, it's not haram, but it's not something one should do. Reflecting on worldly matters, Allah protect us from that. So basic khushu', so, having awe of Allah and, having presence, basic, like having some khushu' is required in the prayer. And then if, past just the very basic for a moment or a moment is what I was taught. Anything beyond that would be recommended. And it takes away from the nur that one will attain in the prayer if one's reflecting on worldly matters. If there's thoughts just going in and out and one doesn't actually reflect on the thoughts, but they're just going in and out, that's waswasa. So, of course, they affect the translation, they affect the concentration, but inshallah, one's not accountable for them. But it's, somebody was asking me about that. And I mentioned that one of the things we were taught to do is to recite Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas before the prayer. And also one thing is to improve our focus when we're doing the nafil before the fard. And when I can do that, then the fard is actually a lot better, when I can improve my focus so that by the time I get to the fard, it's a lot better, then I have a much better fard prayer. Then I actually, alhamdulillah, enjoy the prayer, alhamdulillah. Allah give us tawfiq to do that. So reflecting on worldly matters, it's makruh. So all these will take away from the reward of the prayer, but outwardly the prayer is valid. So with fiqh, we're just going to tell you whether the prayer is valid or not. So if it's an invalid prayer, you have to repeat it indefinitely throughout your life, according to all the 4 schools. And you have to make tawbah. Some people think that you make only tawbah and then you don't have to make up the prayer. No, you have to make tawbah because of if one delayed the prayer such that the time went out and that was intentional, then one makes tawbah for the sin, and one has to make up the prayer. So carrying anything distracting in one's sleeve, placing hands on the waist, cracking one's knuckles, praying on luxurious prayer mats, restricting oneself to a specific number of tasbih while bowing, prostrating, likewise specifying the wording of the tasbih and leaving out other forms of tasbih, clearing one's throat to get someone's attention. So again, it won't break the prayer. Saying subhanallah in response to someone who calls you while praying, so again, it doesn't break the prayer. To correct the imam unless he waits for someone to correct him, in which case it becomes mandatory. However, if the mistake is in the Fatiha, then one must correct him, even if he does not wait. Right, so we went over that. To initiate a salam with the hand. However, if the response is verbal, it invalidates the prayer. So somebody says salam to you. No, not that somebody says salam to you, but to actually initiate, to actually say salam to somebody who hasn't said salam to you. And then to respond to somebody verbally if they've actually said salam to you. To respond with the hand to someone saying Alhamdulillah after he sneezes. Right, but to actually say Yarhamakallah, that actually breaks the prayer. to pray with a strong urge to use the restroom because that will distract you. So that, but if somebody needs to use the restroom, and they sense that, but it's not distracting them, that's not from the makruhāt, and Allah knows best. And then we mentioned this makruhāt specific to surah recitation, reciting 2 surahs in 1 rak'ah, changing the arrangement of the surahs, meaning reciting them. A surah that's placed later in the Quran, you recite that in the first rak'ah, and the one that's early in the Quran, one recites it in the second rak'ah. So changing the order of the mushaf, because that's revealed. The order is revealed. It's wahi. And then there are 2 narrations from Imam Malik regarding not completing a surah. So you should complete a surah even if it's a short surah. Don't do a long surah and then you don't complete it. So do a short surah and complete it. So there's one opinion that is makruh and another that it's permissible. But it's definitely not a recommended act. Reminding the makruhāt actions do not necessitate a prostration or forgetfulness, but if done intentionally, the makruhāt, they diminish the reward of the prayer. Contrary to popular belief, ignorance is not an excuse. I just kind of wanted to add this as a side note. One must take the means to learn. So, and one just makes tawbah and one moves on if one's made mistakes, but one has to learn. So, and this is what I've been taught. And alhamdulillah, there are a lot of means, and Allah facilitate them for us and give us tawfiq to actually take the means and to practice what we've learned. Okay, so a few sundry points. Once one begins a prayer, one must complete it, and one may not leave a valid prayer. So one can't say, oh, it's, I did something that requires a qabli, so I'm just going to get out of the prayer and I'm going to start it all over. No, one may not leave a valid prayer, but one must rectify any mistakes that require rectification. Or, oh, I left a sajda and I'm not going to, and I'm past the point where I can rectify it, so I'm just going to restart the prayer. No, you have to rectify it. If a person is afflicted for a couple of consecutive days with baseless whisperings about the same act of worship, then one is considered a muwaswis in terms of that worship, and the related rulings apply. So I just, we discussed this in the past. I just want to mention this because if you are afflicted with that, I would recite more Quran because, that really helps with the waswasa. Because shaitan's going to work harder with people that are struggling to get close to Allah. So we have to just struggle harder. And, alhamdulillah, Allah is our Lord and He facilitates whatever He wills. So we don't lose hope. We just have to work harder and just make a lot more dua that Allah facilitates ease for us in what He's made obligatory upon us. So if somebody's getting waswasa and they're muwaswis in that worship, if they get whisperings 2-3 days in a row, even if it's once per day, so they would be a muwaswis of the prayer, and then the rulings apply in that they have to ignore their doubts. So doubts are 50-50. So anytime it's, if they're muwaswis in the prayer and if they get a doubt, okay, did I do a 3 rak'ah or 4 rak'ah prayer, and it's 50-50, they have to ignore that if they're a muwaswis. So they have a different ruling, which is why I mentioned that here. This person must ignore these whisperings as they are from shaitan, and you have been commanded to disobey shaitan. And it's recommended, not required, for this person to perform a badi. So it's a way to spite shaitan. Hence, if a muwaswis of the prayer has doubts about performing 3 or 4 rak'ah, he or she assumes it is 4. So whereas the one not afflicted with the whisperings assumes it is 3 and builds the prayer on certainty. Right? So the rulings are different depending on, whether the person's a muwaswis or not. Again, doubts here, this is a fiqh ruling, so it means 50-50. So one's thought is not stronger than the other. And again, if you have doubts about missing something within your prayer, perform what you missed, and it is recommended to perform a badi. Okay, no prostration owed. Okay, so these don't owe a prostration. I'm just going to move. I'm going to close the blind a little bit. Okay, so some things might be makruh, but they won't. You don't know prostration for God. Let's saying Alhamdulillah if you sneezed, but it's disliked and it doesn't break the prayer. Raising one leg slightly to rest, responding to someone's salam with the hand, and it's actually recommended, right? It's actually recommended, but you don't want to initiate a salam with the hand, right? So if somebody didn't say salam to you and they're walking by, you don't raise your hand to say salam to them. That was what was makruh. But to respond to somebody with the hand is actually recommended if they said salam. Okay, so I don't know why I have that twice for some reason. Apologize for that. Crying due to khushu', there's no prostration. But khushu' has to be actual genuine fear or awe of Allah, not something that one's putting on. But when it actually comes just naturally, where one's thinking about the akhirah, or thinking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he's not from this dunya. Nothing about him is from this dunya. Raising one's voice during recitation in response to someone. So, meaning not changing the recitation, but somebody calls out to you and you're reciting the Fatiha. They don't know you're praying, so you just raise your voice so that they know you're praying. There's no prostration owed. Swallowing food present in one's mouth. So it's already there. I mean, it's, one should do siwak and do the clean in between one's teeth, but swallowing food present in one's mouth, there's no prostration owed, and it doesn't break the prayer, obviously. Reciting the qunut out loud, because the Malikis do it in the Fajr prayer in the second rak'ah before ruku'. So, and dua generally should be silent, and it's more likely to be accepted if it's silent. The basis of dua is to do it silently. Reciting an extra surah in the third or fourth rak'ah. If one hears the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and sends praise and peace upon him, there's no obviously prostration owed. In the nafil prayer, it's actually recommended, right? Because there's more leeway in the nafil prayer. To straighten a sutra, which is a barrier, you place a barrier to block a passerby. For the Malikis, it's recommended for it to be a size of a spear. And it should be able to stand on its own, and it should not be something that's distracting because it's going to be right in front of you. So it fell and you straightened it. If you straightened it once, it's fine. There's no prostration owed. If it's done twice, it's too much action, so it breaks the prayer. Or if you're praying with a shawl on your head. So in the Maliki, the way the shawl is placed, it's on the head. It goes over the head, draped over the shoulder. So if it fell, although I pray like that, but my shawl, I don't think it's ever fallen, or if it has, it's very rare. If one picked it up, it doesn't break the prayer unless it's done twice. And there's no prostration owed. It's an intentional act. So to walk a couple of lines or 3 lines to fill a gap or to get a sutra, there's no prostration owed. To walk a couple of lines to block a passerby, I wouldn't do this. A lot of times people, they may not know that the only right a person has while one's praying is your immediate prayer area up till the sajda. As far as the Maliki is concerned, some of the other madhahib, it's different. It's like 35 centimeters beyond your sajda area. But for the Malikis, the only area that you have a right over is up to the spot where you put your head on the ground in sajda. So if somebody walks past that area, it's fine. they're not walking in your space, so to speak. So one doesn't need to block them. And there's no benefit in blocking them. To correct the imam if he stops, to do a tasbih for a need. Women don't clap in the Maliki school. And then inshallah we'll go over the prostration, the congregation prayer next week. And we'll go over some of the details of how to correct the imam. I might have some slides on it today. No prostration owed. Again, not completing a surah. Excuse me. Again, I said there's two narrations from Imam Malik regarding whether it's makruh or permissible, but in any case, it's not recommended. Again, it's better to do a shorter surah and complete it than to do a long one and not complete it. Moving from a surah to another, if you forgot a surah and then you move to another one, there's no prostration owed. Dozing off in the prayer, as long as it's not heavy sleep. So heavy sleep will break wudu, and obviously it's going to break your prayer. So heavy sleep is where if you were sleeping and if you had something in your hand and it fell and you didn't notice it, that's considered heavy sleep. Or if somebody called out your name and you don't hear them, that's heavy sleep. But dozing off in the prayer won't break the prayer. Responding to someone with subhanallah. Moaning if ill. Having doubt about performing the prostration of forgetfulness. There's no prostration owed. You know, if you're like, well, I owed a qabli or badi. Did I do it or not? Right? So the one who doesn't have waswasa, they build upon certainty. So if they have waswasa, they have to ignore that again. But if they're not a muwaswas, then they say, well, it's 50-50, then what I'm sure about it is that, I added or I subtracted or whatever. So I owe a prostration forgetfulness. So then they would do it. Motioning with the hand or head in response, there's no prostration owed. If one has doubts about breaking one's wudu, again, 50-50 chance. So not one thought is stronger than the other. Or about praying with an impurity on one's body, clothes, or place of prayer, one must continue the prayer. Once you're in the prayer, because shaitan comes and he's going to cause waswasa. So if you have doubts, do I have wudu or not? Now you have to continue the prayer. Or do I have najasa on me or not? If the doubt continues after the prayer and one's not in a muwaswas, then one must repeat the prayer. Clearing the throat due to a need such that one pronounces a letter ha or kha. However, if done without a need, so one clears the throat and one doesn't need to, and then one ends up, so one goes, right? So, and one pronounces that letter ha or, But if it's done without need, there's difference of opinion if it invalidates the prayer or not. So, but it's makruh in any case, and per Imam Lakhmi, it does not invalidate the prayer. If it's done forgetfully, so then one owes a badi because one's adding in the prayer from something that's not part of the prayer. So you owe a badi. Dozing off in the prayer, I mentioned that. However, heavy sleep. Sorry, this is a repeat. Listening to someone speaking and even saying alhamdulillah, as long as the listening was for a brief period, otherwise it invalidates the prayer. Meaning if it was for a lengthy period, you stopped and listened to somebody, it actually breaks the prayer. Oops. I'm just gonna remove this. Sorry. Okay, actions that invalidate the prayer. Responding with Yarhamakallah to someone who sneezed and said Alhamdulillah. So if them saying Alhamdulillah doesn't break the prayer, doesn't break their prayer, but if we respond to them, that breaks the prayer. Speaking intentionally. And again, I'll go over, inshallah, when we do the congregational prayer next week, inshallah, we'll go over the how to correct the imam. But generally speaking intentionally in the prayer invalidates the prayer. Turning one's back to the qibla with the feet invalidates the prayer. Blowing air intentionally and uttering a letter breaks the prayer because that's speaking intentionally. So going and one uttered the letter fa, f, fa. Laughing out loud. A follower must continue this prayer even if he cannot control himself. So if you're following, you're praying behind an imam, you have, A'udhu Billah, Allah protect us from this. The wudu is not broken in the Maliki school, but one breaks one's prayer. But if you're praying behind the imam, you have to continue. And then make up the prayer, of course. Saying the salam with doubt about its completion. So some said salam. There's difference opinion about this. But to get out of the difference of opinion, you want to make up the prayer. If you had doubt, you said Assalamu alaikum, and you're like, did I? And while, as you're saying it, or before you said it, you had doubt. Did I complete my prayer or not? Again, if you're muwaswis, then the rulings are different. Anyone who corrects other than the imam. So somebody else is praying and you're praying, or not, but it's speaking to somebody else in the prayer. And again, we'll go over how to correct the imam, inshallah, next week. One makes oneself cry excessively. It's called the khashur versus khushur. Khushur is something that comes naturally, where again, one's remembering Allah or the Prophet ﷺ or something from the akhirah. Allah give us, open our hearts so that we have khushur. The khashur is when one's forcing oneself to remember otherworldly matters, and it's not something that's natural. If one's excessively crying because of this forced khushur, it actually breaks the prayer. And then crying without sound for a worldly calamity, if it's excessive, it breaks the prayer. So this is worldly, whereas the khashur is forcing oneself to cry about something that's otherworldly. Crying without sound, so just tears coming out because somebody passed away. If it's excessive, it breaks the prayer because it's considered excessive action in the prayer. Crying without sound, so if it's excessive, it would break the prayer. Crying with any sound, so if somebody had a sibling, someone who passed away, and they're crying with any sound, or they lost their job or something, it actually breaks the prayer. So it's better to actually just, do extra dhikr, may Allah protect us from all calamities, and to do the extra dhikr before the prayer. And, one would just start over. Allah give us tawfiq and give us thabat. You forgot to say the salam and a significant time has lapsed, or if you began speaking to someone, the prayer is invalid and must be repeated. And we went over the salam if a short time has elapsed. I made a slide on that. So, and I went over it either in the last class or the class before that. Because the salam is a pillar of the prayer. So once you start speaking to somebody, the prayer, you're out of the prayer, and we've done stuff that one can't do in the prayer, that's speaking to someone. So the prayer is invalid, one can't redress it and needs to be repeated. Blowing without uttering a letter is like an action, and if the action is excessive, it invalidates the prayer. And I mentioned this actually in some of the earlier slides. So any kind of speech, if it's intentional, it breaks the prayer. But any type of action, Any type of speech, if it's intentional, breaks the prayer, but action, if it's excessive, then it invalidates the prayer. So blowing and uttering the letter intentionally invalidates the prayer. If it is done forgetfully, then a badi is owed. So if the imam left 3 sunnahs and did not do a qabli, his prayer is invalid. But the latecomer follower must do the prostration if they caught at least 1 rak'ah with the imam. Right, so your prayer, if you're the follower, the latecomer, your prayer would be valid and his would be invalid. There is a few situations where the imam's prayer is invalid, but the follower's is valid, and this is one of them. So you would, right before saying the salam, you would do the qabli. So you would make up what you missed, because if you were a latecomer, and then right before saying the salam, you do a qabli, and your prayer would be valid. So if you caught 1 rak'ah with the imam, and then 1 rak'ah or more, and that he owes he left 3 sunnahs, and he did not do a qabli, even if you weren't there for the 3 sunnahs that he missed, but you would need to do a qabli. Imam loses wudu and immediately places someone in his place. The follower's prayer is valid and the imam's is invalid. 1 left 3 takbeers and did not do a qabli, and a long time passed, or 1 left the prayer area or performed actions that are not permissible in the prayer. So once you started talking, turned away from the qibla, a long time passed, you didn't do the qabli, 1 did salam, and then you didn't do the ba'd, because if the qabli becomes a ba'di, that ba'di needs to be done before a long time passed, and before you've started doing actions that you can't do in the prayer. Otherwise, it's like you're out of the prayer. So you can't make that qabli a ba'di anymore. However, if 1 started another prayer soon after and 1's hands are not close to the knees, 1 may rectify the previous prayer. So, for example, you did a fard prayer and and you owed a qabli because you left 3 takbeers, and you went into the nafil, and your hands are not close to the knees in the first rak'ah. You just go back to the fard. And you rectify it. And you don't say salam to get out of the prayer you're in, because it's already invalid. You just get out, you rectify the previous prayer, and then you start the current prayer again. Leaving a pillar forgetfully and a long time has elapsed. Alhamdulillah, we went over that. Leaving the prayer thinking 1 has lost wudu, and then 1 realized 1 was in wudu. So you left the prayer and you walked away, and then you realized, oh wait, I have my wudu, so now you have to start the prayer over. Okay, this is the last part. So we're getting to the end of the class. Mistakes, and Allah, Allah lighten the grave of Imam al-Akhdari and Sidi Khalil and Imam al-Dasuqi, Sidi Dadir, alhamdulillah. This is really done very nicely in, so Sajda Sahu is done very, very nicely in Akhdari, alhamdulillah. And this is mostly, pretty much all of it's from Akhdari, this part. So differences between fard and nafil prayer. So mistakes in the surah, silent or vocal recitation. So we went over how to redress that in a fard prayer, but in the nafil, if you make mistakes in a surah or silent or vocal recitation, there's nothing owed, because it's a recommended act, reciting the surah or doing the silent in the silent prayers, or reciting vocally in the loud prayers. And then in the fard, just we mentioned how to correct it if you make a mistake in the surah or the silent or vocal recitation. And then you would owe a qabli. if remembered while while bowing or after bowing. A qabli is owed because you missed a surah, perhaps, or if you missed, you didn't recite out loud. Or actually, you could if you did if you made the vocal or the silent vocal, you would owe a ba'di. So it just depends. If remembered before bowing, you correct the mistake. Meaning you made a mistake in the surah, you didn't recite it, or you made a mistake in the silent or vocal recitation, you would correct the mistake, and then you would perform a ba'di. So here I'm going to make a change because you can actually... a qabli or a ba'di is owed. It just depends. So, and then again, we went over that in earlier classes, alhamdulillah. Okay, adding an extra rak'ah. In the nafil, if remembered before bowing, and again, bowing is when your hands are close to the knees, not actually on the knees. As long as they're close to the knees, you're in bowing. Actually placing them on the knees, it's extra. It's not part of, not the fard. The fard is just getting them close to the knees. So if remember them before bowing, like, oops, I'm in nafil. Nafil in the Maliki is only 2 rak'ah. It's always 2 rak'ah. And then you realize, wait, I'm doing my 3rd rak'ah. If you remember before you bow for your 3rd rak'ah, just sit back down, and then you would owe a ba'di because you added in the prayer. If you remembered after or during the bowing, just make it 4 rak'ah and do a qabli for miss salam, because there is an opinion, like in the other schools, that 4 rak'ah, you can have 4 rak'ah nafil, but now you missed the salam because each 2 rak'ah nafil has a salam. So now you made a 4 rak'ah, so you have only 1 salam. So you do a qabli. Forward, see the related slides. We went over that one. Returns to the sitting position whenever one remembers. Meaning, if you realize you've added an extra rak'ah, you just go sit back down, anytime you remember, and you'll do a ba'di because you've added in the prayer. And then the last part is, okay, forgetting a pillar. And a rak'ah is a pillar, but here I separated between a rak'ah and a pillar that's part of a